I think people think of the object, right? The outcome. And I think the language is one of process, and it's one of social engagement.
Yeah.
And it's one of ongoingness. And it's one of building and layering and just like thinking in an additive way.
Right.
And thinking about the artist asking questions that no one else in the room is going to ask.
Right.
And offering prompts from the very beginning, the seed of the idea, all the way to like that outcome or that object functioning as an ongoing prompt for people who are going to experience it.
Right.
You know? So that's how I think about it, as like a process and a language and an ongoingness of engagement with multiple people. And the artist is kind of setting the stage. And depending on what the project is and how much power is given to the artist, the more the better.
Right.
And the more opportunity that there is for the artist to be truly listened to, and for the artist to ask questions and to pose. I like to call it like poetic prompts, and they're often very simple but profound questions that an artist can ask, and that can just help the architect or the engineer or the general contractor, or the person walking on the street when the project is done, quote unquote, because it's not done. It's in an ongoing state with people continuing to experience it.
Right.
It's really powerful.
I love that you say that it's not done. It's almost like it doesn't even start until it's built. Right. That's when the experience of art starts, is when the first eyeballs or the first ears or the first nose or whatever can experience it.
Welcome to Signal Radio, where we talk with project partners, collaborators, and visionaries about places and spaces that shape our work. Today, we're talking with Tamar Benzikry Stern, principal of Art and Purpose, an artist-forward consulting firm who serves foundations, nonprofits, and communities to shape culture, inspire innovation, and drive positive change. We're chatting about public art and the power it has in our communities, inspired by the art imperative for Watershed. Watershed is an art-centered live, work, and craft-focused development in South Seattle that envisions a live-work district in the heart of Seattle's most industrious community. Thanks for being with us today.
So there's a conversation we've been having, I think, for a long time, since For Culture Days, of how cities and places can be really identified by their art, right? So those without art are different than those with art. And then the type of art and how artists are engaged, treated, deployed in our cities. So can we talk about how art has the power to be a social tool? And how, if we look at it that way, how it can inspire design or urban thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people sometimes have this notion of the artist in their studio or the solitary genius. And that exists, right? There's all sorts of artists. Like, let's just start out with that. There's all sorts of artists that work in all sorts of medium, offering a range of messages. But like, for the purposes of our conversation, we're talking about the artists that are working in public and the artists that by nature are social beings and are creating social processes and social practices and products that are designed to be social. Even if one person is having an experience with a public artwork, I would consider that a social experience, because they're engaging with something that an artist made to be engaged by someone else. Right. So I just think that's like an important thing to start out with, is just thinking about the intention of the work and then the process of making it and then the outcome and how it's experienced.
Yeah, so it's that process, right? We can think of art as this thing that's so much more powerful than politics or money or streets, or like, it's a will, right? Yeah. It's this intangible thing And when we think about design, like if we think about art first, we think about, like I go right to protest, right? Like the people united will never be defeated. There's a beat there.
Yeah.
And are there ways that we as planners or as cities or as communities can reach out to artists or engage artists in a way that's different than today? Because today there's a lot of, it's like, okay, we have a thing now and we're going to do a public call for artists. And now we've immediately put the artists in a box. Is there a way we can circumnavigate that box?
Yeah.
That we can think of, that maybe we can start testing with Watershed and then impart that to our cities and communities?
Yeah, I think it's challenging because it's like, on one hand, there's the art doesn't start until it's done, in the sense that that's like when the reception happens and the engagement with the public begins. In terms of like the finished product being experienced, often there's public process that happens before that, you know very well. On the other hand, there's so much work that's going on from the beginning of the process that, like, I think you could call that art too.
Exactly.
And so thinking about, well, what kind of language can we use to qualify like that part of the art process?
Right.
But I think what you're getting at, or maybe it's something that I've actually been thinking a lot about, like having worked at For Culture, King County's Cultural Services Agency, and the public art team specifically for over a decade, where we did a lot of public process with a lot of panels and, there's a fair amount of bureaucracy and a fair amount of layers, and it's all for the best of intentions. But just, studying the field of public art more broadly, around the country, specifically in the United States, I think it keeps a lot of artists out of the field because it is so dense.
Right.
Just the application process, just the selection process, let alone the actual design and implementation process is just so particular and onerous and rigorous, not necessarily in the best form of the word rigor.
Right.
And so I think you often end up with artists who, have done it enough times that they continue to do it. And so then you end up hearing from them a lot. And they might have something, good to say, but there's a lot of other people that we need to be hearing from.
Right.
But either they haven't had the experience and then they're not given the experience because the process is favoring people with experience, or they're not interested in that process.
Right.
But it's really unfortunate because I think we really do need to hear from a lot of other voices.
Right.
And that's actually something that I'm really interested in. And after a decade at For Culture, I went on to curate for Facebook for 4 years, where I was able to, as a curator, make direct selections and invite artists that I felt like could scale up and could experiment in media that they hadn't worked with before, and have the time and the resources to do that kind of R&D. And it was incredibly liberating for me as a administrator, as a curator, as a creative, but also for the artists to be able to just do the work. So I think about that for, how can I bring the best of what I learned in the field of public art, and how can I bring the best of what I learned being a curator in a really kind of empowered and resourced situation, into this kind of public-private partnership that we find ourselves in Watershed, and thinking about like the next decade and artists here that are specifically in Seattle and specifically in Georgetown, specifically in Equinox, and wanting to really nurture what is here and the history that's here and the incredible heart that's here, but also see what's missing and how can we expand and create these like concentric circles, and nourish artists in ways that I think this district is uniquely poised to do. Yeah.
It's like the dropping the pebble in
totally.
the glassy lake,
I was completely imagining the water when I said that. I love that you picked up on that. Yeah.
It goes like the goal is for it to be out of control, right? Because right now it's got so much control on it. It's almost like our political party is like there's so much control on it that someone who has a great idea can't break in because there's so much instilled routine.
Yeah.
Right? Like we think about infrastructure projects, like one of the greatest risks to infrastructure, like big urban infrastructure, like sewage or electrical power generation, is business as usual. And this kind of disruption of that business as usual of artists being like, okay, you're over there. This is where your art fits. Your art fits. Mm-hmm. Not this gesture for the city.
Yeah.
Right? Georgetown Wet Weather, when Sans Façon's Monument to Rain is there, mm-hmm. yes, the architecture and the landscape architecture are powerful, and they've changed the face of infrastructure in South Seattle. However, when that piece of artwork is installed, it will be the thing people remember. It'll be the thing.
Yeah.
And it's that memory that art creates, and it is a fraction of a fraction of the total, if you want to look at money, the budget of the project.
Yeah, you know, I just think it's so easy for life to go by, and it's so easy for us to just like go through places, walk over, and not notice because we're all busy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like I'm especially interested in artists that help us pause, mm-hmm. and artists that give us those prompts that help us to see a place differently and help us to see our role in a place and in a community, the history, the present that we're actively not seeing, mm-hmm. or that we didn't even know that was there to see, and that help us like see the seeds of a future that we can help to build. And I think that that's like what is really just the energy that I'm picking up from everyone that I'm talking to as I'm starting to learn more and more about what the ambitions for a watershed are, mm-hmm. and the roots that are here in Equinox. It's like all of that. It's like honoring what has been here and thinking about these seeds for the future. Yeah.
And thinking about what has been here started so long ago.
Yeah.
Like deep time, right? Yeah. You think about, and if we just think Seattle time, we can go way back into, you know, the, what was their name? The Mystics, mm-hmm. in Pioneer Square. Yeah. That was before Sam was there. However, they're picking up on a lot of the same things. Yeah. And the time at the Washington Shoe and 619 and the INS building. Yeah. Then the Boiler Works and Equinox and Watershed. It's that ripple. Yeah. And we can go even further, right? If we look at, you know, thinking about the people of this land, the first peoples of this land, thinking about like the land itself and the just the layers of sedimentation and the geology. And I was actually talking to John and to Ben about an idea that came up previously about ghost trees, mm-hmm. and some of the trees that are not going to be able to stay, but being able to honor them in some way by reusing them. Mm-hmm. But one of the ideas that we're talking about now is, well, what if there's a way to, you could take the tree as a material and reuse it. And that might be something we do. Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. But there's other things we could do, right? We could actually create a form of that tree using the material of the tree. And that inspired for me thinking just more broadly about this metaphor of ghosts of these sites, mm-hmm. and thinking about how, like, what if every building has a ghost, whether that's a tree or some other story, mm-hmm. that gets embodied through, mm-hmm. some form of sculpture or art that is maybe in the same place in every building. And the mm-hmm. people know as they're like going through the meander of the district, mm-hmm. To look for that kind of chapter in this building story of these buildings of this district, but also of this place over time. Right. John talked about another thing in that conversation that is so poetic and apropos to this whole thing. And it was the idea of harvesting seeds from the trees that are here now, mm-hmm. germinating them and planting them in the district so mm-hmm. that there is this legacy. And it's like the grandchildren, right? It's been said that the DNA of the Duwamish people are in this land. Mm-hmm. So every time you turn over the dirt that's here, you're turning over Duwamish people, because they are the trees, they are the water, they were the rain, they are the rain. And it's that type of legacy that this story can carry. And art is the one tool that can do it. Writing can do it to a certain degree. Photography can do it to a certain degree. Interpretation of art so that it is something that's emotional.
Yeah.
Can do
It's
it.
a big responsibility. It's an honor. And I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Awesome. Thanks, Tamar. I really appreciate you being here with
my
us.
pleasure.
Thanks.